Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to stitch a gathered seam. Alright, so here you can see I have two templates or two patterns cut. These aside. Alright, one is obviously longer than the other. Alright, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to gather this one up so we can stitch it to this one so it becomes the same length as this one. Alright, you'll notice that there's 3 notches here on this one and 3 notches on this one. Okay, we want to gather this one up so that these 3 notches will match up with these 3 notches. All right, so all that extra fullness or extra fabric that we have in this piece is actually between here and here, the center notch and this side notch, and the center notch and this side notch. So this is where we'll be gathering here and here. We'll shrink that up and then we'll be able to sew it to this one. Okay, so our first step that we have to do is you have to actually do 2 rows of gathering stitches. All right, so we have 1/2 inch seam allowance on both of these. On this, I'm going to actually do 2 rows of gathering stitches. The first one will be at 1/2 inch, and then the second one will be 1/8 of an inch in from that into the seam allowance from that first row. All right, so let's go to the sewing machine and do that right now. All right, we're at the sewing machine now. Now we're going to do those 2 rows of gathering stitches. All right, the first one will be at about, or will be at 1/2 inch, just slightly under 1/2 inch, and then my second one will be about 1/8 of an inch away from that into the seam allowance. All right, we're going to lengthen our stitches, and typically the construction stitch I use is about, I would say, 8 or 9 stitches per inch. This will be about 6 inches per inch. Okay, so I'm going to lengthen that. We actually want our gathering to start at the notch here, all the way over here, and then end at this notch right here. Okay, so if we want our gathering to start at those 2 notches, we have to start our gathering stitches about 1 inch before those 2 notches. Okay, if we start our gathering stitches right at the notch where we want to start gathering, it won't gather there. So you always want to start your gathering stitches about 1 inch away from where you want your gathers to start. Okay, so again, I want my gathers to start at this notch right here. So I'm going to start my gathers 1 inch away from that notch. Here we go. Do not back tack because we want to be able to pull these threads. All right, cut long threads there. So there's my first row of gathering stitches. Now let's go ahead and do a second row, and that second row is going to be about 1/8 of an inch in to the seam allowance away from that. And I'm just going to use this toe on my presser foot as a guide. So this toe right here I'm using as a guide. I'm actually going to just make sure this thread, I'm going to watch where this row of stitching I just did goes. I want that row of stitching to go right down the center of this toe. If I do that, for this presser foot, I should be about 1/8 of an inch away from there. Okay, and that will be my guide. Here we go. Alright, and there's my second row of gathering stitches. Alright, let's go back to the pattern table where we can gather these up. Alright, here we are. We can go ahead and we can gather these so that they match here. The first thing to be able to do this is we're actually going to pin these 2 pieces of fabric together. Alright, so we're going to put right sides together. You can see that my right sides have lines on them and the wrong side has nothing. Okay, so what I want to do is put right sides together. I want to match up my center notch with my center notch and my 2 side notches with these 2 side notches. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to first line up that center notch, and I'll just put a pin right through there, like so. And now I'm going to line up my side notches, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull over this fabric, matching those up here, and then come over to this side and match up those 2 side notches and put a pin in there. Okay, so if I flip this around, this is what this looks like. You can see all that extra fabric I have right here and right here. It's between the center pin and the side pins. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we can actually pull our threads to gather up this extra fabric. Okay, so what we want to do is actually grab, you have your top thread and your bobbin thread. Typically you want to grab your bobbin thread, that one pulls the best. And we're going to grab both of those threads. Alright, you don't want to grab one bobbin thread and one of the top threads. You want to grab both of the same threads. So either both of the top threads or both of the bobbin threads. I'm going to grab both of the bobbin threads, which you can see I'm holding them right here. And here's the other two threads from the other side. Those we don't want to pull on. It's just these two. Alright, so we're going to pull on those. And you'll see as I pull them that this will start to gather and shrink. Alright, so here we go. There we go. So I've now shrunk it down so it's exactly the same size as this smaller piece of fabric. Alright, so what we want to do is do that, pull that, so maybe it's a little smaller, and then I'm just going to pull that back to size right there, like so. And now I want to anchor in these threads. Alright, I don't want them to come out to get looser, I don't want to pull them by accident to make them smaller, because it's right now I have exactly the right size here. Alright, those are both matching perfectly. So I'm going to put a pin in here right at the edge. And I can take those threads and I'm just going to anchor them around that pin by just figure eighting around it a few times, like so. Okay, now these threads aren't going to loosen or tighten, and I can move these gathers freely. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is move these gathers so that they're evenly spread between that side notch and that center notch. Okay, alright, so now I'm just going to take a pin, and there's no real magic trick to it, just kind of have to eye it and gather it. Alright, now again, some of you might be asking why we did two rows of stitching for gathering. We did that for a couple reasons. One, it gives you nicer gathers when you do that. They're just fuller and crisper. And the other thing is, if you're gathering a very long length of fabric and one of these rows breaks, you still have your other row of thread, so you don't have to go back and put all your gathering stitches back in. Alright, so I'm just kind of spreading this as evenly as I can. And again, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. There we go. Alright, so now I've spread these as evenly as I can between the side notch and the center notch. I don't want those to shift on me, so I'm going to go ahead and pin through those layers. A few times. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this side now. So I'm going to find my two threads here, the two top threads I have, or a bobbin. There we go. And again, I'm going to pull these so that this larger piece that I need to shrink down is actually becomes smaller than the smallest piece right now. So let's go ahead and do that. Pull those. Now it's smaller. You can see the side that used to be too small is now a little bigger than this side. Once you've done that, just pull it out so that they're evenly matched, like so. And then we just want to anchor in those threads. So we'll put a pin in right here. And we'll just figure eight around that pin a couple times. Okay? And now we just need to spread this evenly. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, and now let's go ahead and pin through that area right there a few times, just locking those gathers in place. And there we go. All right, so I've now gathered all that fullness down, and we're going to go ahead and stitch it in place. So let's go back to the sewing machine. All right, we're back. We're going to go ahead and stitch this at a 1/2 inch. Make sure to shorten your stitch length back to your construction stitch before you do that. And I can go ahead and remove this pin and kind of get all that out of the way. There we go. Now I'm going to stitch this with the gather side up so I can see. And I'm going to stitch at my full 1/2 inch now so that we don't see those gathering stitches. And we're going to back tack at the beginning and at the end because this is a permanent seam that we don't want coming out. All right, here we go. Now sometimes it might be something I like to do is take a pin and kind of push those gathers under as I go. Kind of helps keep them from being, sometimes that presser foot will want to push them over, and this way you can kind of ease it and push it under the foot so that doesn't happen. And if you feel like it's a little uneven or you missed a spot, you want to kind of push some more gathers in there as you're going, feel free to stop and do that. And back tack at the end as well. There we go. Get those threads. I'm going to leave my gathering threads in for now just in case there's any issues. I need to change it, so let's go ahead and open this up. That looks good. Alright, so let's go back to the cutting table. Alright, so there it is. It looks good. We can now just cut our threads. If you want, you can pull your gathering stitches out. You don't have to. You can just cut off the cut them off the long threads. I like to pull them out, so I'm going to quickly do that. Alright, so they've been pulled out, mostly. Okay, and again, there it is. That's what it looks like. Now we can give this a press too, if you'd like. So, when we press this, we want to be very careful. We don't want to press our gathers because right now they have some fullness and some body to them. If we press them, it will flatten them out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over to the wrong side. And I'm going to pull this nice and tight. I'll pull it like so. And I'm going to use the very tip of my iron right here. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of stay on this side of the seam allowance. I'll press my seam allowance up. And I'm not going to touch anything past that stitching line. I'm just going to touch the seam allowance. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm making sure I pull this nice and tight as I go so I can have a nice clean seam on the other side. And again, I'm being very careful not to go past that stitching line with the tip of my iron. Alright, so there is my gathered seam, all gathered up. Alright, I hope that helps everybody. Good luck on your sewing.